Hello and welcome to another retro gaming exploration from Replay Retro. I'm Matt, and on today's show we're going to take a look at the early roots of handheld gaming. When we think of handheld games today, we typically think of the massively successful Nintendo DS and its predecessors in the Game Boy series. But the original Game Boy, released in 1989, came a whole 10 years after the Milton Bradley toy company first brought us the star of today's show, the Microvision. In the 1970s and early 80s, there were a number of tabletop electronic games in existence which made use of a wide variety of early display technologies and therefore did not require the use of a separate television screen. These games were the children of previous electromechanical games like Waco Electronics' Tic-Tac-Toe, released in 1972, combined with the emergence of the electronic display calculator market of the early 70s. But it wasn't until 1976 that these games would take an evolutionary leap thanks to Mattel's new marketing director, Michael Katz. Katz knew that as popular as these tabletop games were, they just weren't portable enough to be the massive success he wanted. So he told the company's engineers to start working on LED-based games no larger than a calculator. The result of which was the release of Auto Race and Football, which swept the market and quickly created a whole new multi-million-pound product category, leading to other manufacturers such as Bandai and Coleco producing their own handheld games and creating the competition which would spur on the next evolutionary step in this new frontier. Enter J. Smith of Smith Engineering. In 1979, Smith Engineering and Milton Bradley showed the world a concept far ahead of its time, an ambitious new machine by the name of Microvision. This new handheld game featured exchangeable cartridges just like the popular home consoles of the time, including the Atari 2600, meaning that for the first time ever, gamers could play more than one game on their handheld system, rather than needing several completely separate consoles, something which today we see as the norm and take for granted. Sadly, due to a number of flaws in the design of the Microvision, this system is becoming increasingly difficult to find in working condition. But let's take a look at the hardware itself and just a few of the available games. As you can see, the console itself comes in this rather nice fake leather case. Let's take it out. I should point out that for the sake of this review I've actually taken off the game cartridge that would come with it so you can see exactly what the system itself looks like. Starting from the top, we have obviously circuitry and whatnot here, which is also where the single piezo speaker is hidden for those basic sound effects of the game. Then just here you have the 16 by 16 pixel monochrome display, which for its time was quite impressive. Remember that the Game Boy screen, which came out 10 years later, wasn't really all that much more advanced, considering the 10-year gap. Just underneath the screen here you have this black section, which is actually the keypad. Now the cartridges themselves, which we'll look at in a moment, would link into this keypad to press down the buttons. So as you can see, you actually have a 3x4 button keypad, but most of the games tended to use between 4 and 6 buttons. So it was never fully used, but it could have been. So it was a good way of dealing with the control problems associated with multiple cartridge systems. Just below that you have this little paddle control here, similar to the paddle controls you would get on a Pong console, although slightly more resistive. On the side of the system here you have the power button, just simple on-off power button. Round the back you have the battery door here, which when you lift off reveals that the system will require two 9-volt batteries. And actually just above that battery door you'll see this little dial here. That's for changing the contrast of the monochrome display. It's just a simple voltage control, but works very effectively to adjust the contrast in most situations. And that is the system itself. So let's take a look at one of the games themselves and how they clip on. You can see here that here's one of the games. This is Blockbuster. This is the pack-in game, which is a Breakout clone. You'll see here you've got your 4 buttons for actually using the game, and obviously you would use the paddle as well. These buttons have studs in them there, which press into the studs on the keypad. Then the actual screen itself is simply a plastic overlay which goes on top of the main screen. In this section up here is where you will find the processor and the RAM and ROM for that individual game. Something very unique about the Microvision is the fact that the game cartridges themselves contain the processor, while the system does not contain a processor. It's an interesting way of doing it, and also actually brings us on to the first weakness of the system. Because the processor itself is contained within the cartridge, you can unfortunately very easily damage it with static charges through the contact. Very, very easy to damage these cartridges and make them utterly useless. The second unfortunate design flaw of the system is the way these buttons work. Obviously, with repeated pressing on these buttons, which are just a piece of cut out plastic essentially, these buttons can break off, and when we look at the other games in a moment you'll see that my collection unfortunately has had this problem. The third issue that the system struggled with is the screen itself is very, very afraid of heat and light. It doesn't take much direct light or heat exposure to that screen for it to be utterly unplayable, which again is another one of the many reasons that this system is becoming so rare to find in working condition. And the final fault is keypad rot. Unfortunately, this keypad is very susceptible to just failing because it's a very weak and delicate membrane, and once it's gone, it's gone. It's very unfortunate, but you have to remember that this was the first system of its kind. There wasn't anything previous to this for Milton Bradley or Smith Engineering to learn from. So overall, they did a pretty good job. So anyway, let's pause there and we'll take a look at the games. The game we're going to look at is the Breakout clone Blockbuster. You'll have to forgive the camera work because it's going to be very difficult to film this game while playing it, but let's just see what we can accomplish. Okay, let's press start. You can see there I'm moving around on the bottom, and let's release the ball. This is so difficult when you're looking through a camera lens. It's also a very, very quick version. You can adjust it. So there you go, I managed to get 3 points there on Breakout. Probably not the best Breakout score anyone has ever got. Let's change the game now, see what else we've got here. To change the game, we simply turn the system off at the side, grab these 2 little points, and carefully lever away the system, being careful not to annoy the contacts that live under there, because obviously it's those contacts that would cause the static shock which can damage the cartridge. So let's put that over there and have a look at our next game, which is Space Blitz. Let's have a quick look. I believe this one is a clone of Space Invaders. You can see inside the box there you get your instruction manual and the game cartridge itself. And you can see here that this one has had a button break off, indicating the problem I was talking to you about earlier. That button is in fact here in the box. But let's see if we can get Space Blitz to fire up. Okay, well that's loaded it in anyway. Seems a little bit loose on that bottom corner, but let's switch her on and see what happens. It's going to be difficult for you guys to see this game, but essentially I have dots coming down these lines here, and I have to pick the right moment to fire my weapons. Obviously I don't have this third weapon without pressing down very difficultly. You can see there, that's me firing. There's a dot coming. Oh, I missed it. You have to actually get the correct dot range, and as you can see, that noise there indicates that that particular Space Invader or Space Blitzer has reached the bottom of the screen and therefore defeated my attempt to save planet Earth. I apologise to all you residents of planet Earth, as I didn't manage to kill a single space blitzer, not invader. And so you're all now living under Martian supremacy. My apologies. Anyway, let's try another game. It's very nice packaging actually that these come in, I think. Nice big sturdy box. Considering some of the cardboard boxes games would later come in, Nintendo, I'm looking at you. This is a very good solid box, and you actually get screenshots. So you can see here, choose attacking speed and energy level. You'll see the invasion begin. There's a picture of the invasion occurring. Try to gauge distance, then fire. It's a hit, but another invader takes its place. Keep firing, because if invader lands, the game's over and your score is final. The last game we'll look at here is Shooting Star. I have a feeling this is something to do with Space Invaders again, but I just can't quite remember. So let's have a look at the back of this box, which is upside down. Where will the next alien target come from? Get ready to fire. Right, so these aliens are clearly going to fly across the screen and I have to hit them. You only have one chance to hit the target. Missed. And I'll try again. I thought I only had one chance. Oh, okay. Victory! A target destroyed, but keep watching. There are more aliens on the way. These are the European cartridges, by the way, which you can see come in bright, nice colours, like you've got the bright red here. All the American cartridges came in this rather dull grey. No idea why, really. I wouldn't have thought the money saving there was massive, really. But anyway, as you can see, this cartridge has lost an awful lot of buttons, but they are at least all in the box. Hello, what was that in the bottom there? Aha, I have a 90-day limited warranty. I might send this off and see if I can get a way of repairing those buttons, or a replacement for the buttons. I'm sure I've only owned this 90 days. Brilliant. That can be fixed. I believe what we are now witnessing is keyboard rot, unfortunately. But as you can see, this is one of the more complicated games that would have more buttons. These buttons at the bottom here are for the direction of your shot. Like that. Do you want to shoot that away? Do you want to shoot that away? Or do you want to shoot that away? This missing button here. So yeah, unfortunately that game doesn't work, but at least you now get an idea of how the system itself worked. Well, while the Microvision may not have been a great success, it certainly paved the way for future handheld gaming, and it's fair to say that the DS owes its existence to this little console. Although perhaps it can also be blamed for all those pop stations cluttering the market too, so it's not all great. Still, at least it can't be blamed for the glut of tacky LCD games that still plague the gaming world to this day. Just before its death in 1981, the Microvision had a small role in Friday the 13th Part 2, and also received a licensed Star Trek game. Jay Smith then went on to design the brilliant but again vastly underrated Vectrex home console, and Michael Katz took charge at Sega of America during the release of the Genesis. Cartridge-based handheld gaming would eventually be revived in 1989 by Gunpei Yokoi's Game Boy console, which became a massive hit after the release of one of the world's best-loved and most well-known puzzle games, Tetris. Ironically, if Tetris had been invented earlier, history may well have looked more fondly on the Microvision, as its 16 by 16 pixel screen would have been perfect for this addictive puzzle game. But this was not to be, and the Microvision slipped quietly into obscurity, and the world's first cartridge-based handheld game was forgotten. That's all from Replay Retro this week. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter for more news about the show, and of course make sure you come back next week for more retro gaming reviews. See you then.